In this episode, we talk about the concerns raised about VVPATs and what the Election Commission has to say about it. We also give you an update about BRS MLA K Kavitha being arrested by the CBI. But first, we talk about the new weight loss drugs like Ozempic. Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargava, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. Over the past year or so, a new class of diabetes medicines have taken the world by storm for their potential to drastically reduce weight. At the moment, hundreds of thousands of people around the world have been taking drugs like Ozempic to reduce their waistlines, with some making claims that such drugs could potentially end obesity. In fact, two of these drugs, Wegovy and Ozempic, made by the Danish pharmaceutical company Novo Nordisk, have been so popular that they have revolutionized the country's economy. For instance, last year, Denmark's economy grew by 1.9%. And out of this, 1.7% was from the pharma sector. And this is significant because during the same period, the revenue of Novo Nordisk was about 10 times that of its next best competitor. To find out how these drugs work, the extent to which they actually reduce weight, and their potential side effects, Indian Express's Anonna Dutt joins us. Anonna, you have been writing about these drugs for the paper. Tell us, when were they first introduced in the market? And was it Ozempic with its active ingredient, semaglutide? Was that the first one?
So semaglutide is the one which has been a game changer. There have been other GLP-1 receptor agonists, as these drugs are referred to, before that as well. And, the previous generation of drugs like liraglutide is available in India.
Okay, and talk about the extent to which these new drugs, especially in their injectable form, to what extent do they help reduce weight?
So the data that we have so far, they result in a weight loss of about 15 to 20% of your body weight. So if you're 100 kgs, 15 to 20 kgs off. Some work better for people. So we've seen in some cases up to 27, 28% weight loss.
And how does that compare to surgeries and even lifestyle changes, for example?
So the thing about the drugs and why it has taken social media by the storm is that it is easier, right? Lifestyle change is hard. It has to be sustained over years. You have to exercise regularly. You have to control your diet, restrict your calorie intake. It's difficult to do. So this drug is just a push that people might need, especially for people who are morbidly obese. It can be very difficult to exercise. So once they lose a little weight with the help of the drugs, they can maintain a better lifestyle. And which is why these drugs have now become popular. When it comes to bariatric surgeries, the trials that have been done so far in other countries have shown a result of about 15% to up to 24-25% of your body weight loss, which is significant, which is equivalent to what we see with bariatric surgeries.
Right, and although we have seen instances of people using it for cosmetic reasons, losing weight can be crucial for people with diseases like diabetes. And in fact, drugs like semaglutide and tirzepatide are meant for those with diabetes. Tell us, how exactly do these drugs work?
So basically, these drugs are called GLP-1 receptor agonists, which is a category of incretin mimetics. Incretins are hormones that are present in the digestive system, which assists in digestion. And these medicines actually mimic the action of these hormones. They help in bringing down the glucose levels by better absorption in the digestive tract. It also helps in slowing down the digestion, which means that you are full for longer. So one, you're eating less food. And secondly, a slow digestion also means that there are no sudden sugar spikes that you have if once you consume a meal. So there are various mechanisms by which these drugs work. But first and foremost, these are meant for diabetes. Then, of course, later on, it was approved for obesity because it showed great results in helping people achieve their weight goals. Now there are trials going on to see the impact of these medicines on kidney diseases, on non-alcoholic fatty liver, which is a condition where there is a lot of fat deposition that happens in the liver because people are leading unhealthy lifestyles and not because of alcoholic beverages, which was the traditional case. So these drugs are now being trialed for other lifestyle conditions as well.
And you mentioned how a number of these drugs, their trials are going on in India. Talk about what these trials are focusing on. What are they trying to find out?
So, of course, a majority of the trials are looking at the main diseases that these drugs are meant for, which is diabetes and obesity. Along with that, they are also looking at whether it has an impact on heart health. Now, as we know, of course, obesity, diabetes, hypertension, all of these are risk factors for diabetes. So if you are improving obesity and you're improving diabetes control, it is likely to bring down cardiovascular mortality as well. But there are trials to see whether that happens or not. Other than that, there are trials which are looking at the outcomes for various complications of diabetes, such as, the peripheral neuropathy, diabetic retinopathy. These are conditions that people who have lived with diabetes for a number of years suffer from. So they're looking whether the outcomes in these complications are better if people take these medicines. Other than that, I have mentioned earlier that there are studies to look at whether it improves the outcomes of chronic kidney disease, non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, which is the last stage of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So these are basically the conditions for which trials are going on in this category.
And Anonna, are there any major side effects associated with taking these drugs? Is there anything people should be concerned about?
Yes, there are side effects, and the most common is, of course, vomiting, nausea, a lot of gastric issues, because that is the main area of action for these drugs. So initially when you start, there is a lot of nausea and vomiting that people face, which actually results in people dropping out, people stopping the medicine. But the dosage in these drugs is such that you scale up the dose over a period of time. And you do face these side effects for the first few weeks, but then they go away. And that's when you start seeing the benefits of the drug as well. Of course, nausea, vomiting, and gastric issues are the most common of the side effects, which a lot of the people taking the drugs face. But there are rare but serious side effects of the drugs as well, especially if the patients who are receiving the drugs are not chosen carefully. So it can result in stomach paralysis, especially in people who've lived with diabetes for years, because their intestine movement is anyway little compromised because of nerve damage, etc., for long years of diabetes. So if they are given this medicine, there are chances that they will have stomach paralysis. Then there is chances of pancreatitis, which is inflammation of the pancreas. There are chances of acute kidney injury. There are chances of thyroid cancer in some. And of course, studies are going on to see whether it worsens diabetic retinopathy. So these are the possible side effects, rare but serious ones.
And so are experts concerned about how popular these drugs have become and just how many people are taking it for cosmetic reasons?
Definitely. Because that is the primary thing that all the doctors talk about, that the patient selection for these drugs have to be very carefully done, because it's not that, I have a wedding coming up in a month and I want to lose the last 5 kgs and you take the drug. No, you cannot do that. These are meant for morbidly obese people or obese people with diabetes and other complications where, these are actually a threat to life and you need to lose that weight. This is the same recommendation as it goes for bariatric surgeries. So it's only meant for people with severe weight problems and associated other health issues. It cannot be given without testing for various other conditions, looking at the history of the patient, whether they have a family history of thyroid cancer, for example. So all of this has to be considered before the medication is given. Also, the FDA has asked doctors to keep a track of whether it's leading to mood fluctuations and depression. because weight loss drugs in the past have been associated with self-harm and suicidal thoughts. So that's also something which experts are keeping a track of, at least. That hasn't been proven, but people are worried about it. So yeah, the patient selection is very important for these drugs, and it cannot be prescribed just to anybody for losing weight.
And Anonna, we know that India is called the diabetes capital of the world. Talk about what it would mean for the country once these drugs are introduced in the market here.
So India is top for diabetes, and our obesity is also on the rise, which means that, of course, there would be a huge number of people in this country who would benefit from these drugs. There is a huge market, of course, because the challenge with India is that Indians develop diabetes and heart diseases, say, 10 years before their Western counterparts. So we have young people with these conditions who need to manage these conditions and live a longer life. So there is a market. There is already an established market, and there would be people who need these drugs, but these cannot become the first line of treatment. Diabetes treatment will still be, the basic pills that you get prescribed, then the combination of pills that you get prescribed. And this would be given to a select group of people, especially those who are morbidly obese and fit all the selection criteria. So that's not a huge proportion, but in India, that's a huge number.
And next we talk about VVPATs. And for those who don't know what those are and what VVPAT stands for, here's Indian Express's Damini Nath.
So the VVPAT stands for Voter Verifiable Paper Audit Trail. It's basically a machine that is attached to the EVM.
EVM, of course, is the electronic voting machine we use to cast our votes.
So when the ballot unit of the EVM then sends a button number to the control unit. The control unit then communicates with the VVPAT, tells it which slip to print. Once the slip is printed, the voter sees the slip for 7 seconds. It gets cut and drops into a compartment underneath. After that, the control unit records the vote.
The whole idea behind VVPATs is to ensure that voters can confirm that their vote has been cast accurately. It provides voters with the confidence that their vote has indeed been registered for the party of their choice.
So VVPATs were first introduced in 2013, but the idea first came to the Election Commission in 2010 when it met representatives of political parties to discuss ways to make the EVM voting more transparent. ECI had a prototype made and it was tested in July 2011. And the final design was approved in February 2013, and the Conduct of Election Rules 1961 were then amended to include the VVPAT in the voting process. From June 2017 onwards, there's been 100% implementation of VVPATs, which means every EVM in the country is now attached to a VVPAT.
Now, even though each voter gets to see the VVPAT slip, only a tiny fraction of these slips are later verified against all the votes cast. And this is why the electoral watchdog, the Association of Democratic Reforms, last month filed a petition in the Supreme Court saying that to ensure free and fair elections, the tally from all the electronic voting machines should be cross-verified with the VVPATs. And it's not just electoral watchdogs. Various opposition parties have also been making similar demands for a while now. In this segment, we speak to Damini Nath about these demands and how the Election Commission has responded to it. Damini, tell us how many VVPAT slips right now are used to verify the final vote count?
So a small percentage of the VVPAT slips are currently counted. As the rules are today, 5 randomly selected polling stations in each assembly constituency or an assembly segment in case of a Lok Sabha constituency are selected, and all VVPAT slips in those 5 are counted. Earlier, this was only 1 polling station in each assembly constituency or segment, but this was increased after a Supreme Court order in 2019.
And could you talk about the kind of demands we have seen from opposition parties regarding VVPAT slips over the years?
So opposition parties have been demanding that VVPAT slips should be counted in a bigger percentage. Some have said 10%, some have said 50%. And most recently in December 2023, the India Alliance passed a resolution calling for 100% counting of VVPAT slips. Their suggestion was that the VVPAT slip should be handed over to the voter. The voter can then verify their vote. and then place that slip into a separate box. And 100% of those slips should then be counted, is what the India Alliance suggested.
And what has been the EC stance regarding this? Because obviously verifying all the VVPAT slips would require a lot more work.
Right. So since this matter has been in court throughout the existence of the VVPAT, the EC has been saying that the percentage of VVPATs counted as of now is adequate. According to the EC, there's been no case of transfer of a vote of one candidate to the other, and wherever there's been a difference in the count of the VVPAT and the EVM, it's been chalked up to human error, like, the polling officials not deleting the data of the mock poll. So the EC has said that if they were to count 100% of the VVPAT slips, it would take 5 or 6 days, and this would lead to a delay in declaring the election results.
And Damini, has this issue been taken up by the courts as well?
So the issue of increasing the count of VVPAT slips has been with the Supreme Court since 2019. Activists, organizations like the Association for Democratic Reforms have been arguing for a greater percentage of counting. In fact, there are petitions pending before the Supreme Court right now seeking 100% counting of VVPATs. And the court has even said that they will hear this matter on April 16th, which is just a few days before the first phase of polling in the Lok Sabha elections.
And also this demand for verifying all VVPAT slips, it aligns with the larger concerns around EVMs, because almost every other party has blamed EVMs when they have lost.
So many opposition parties have from time to time raised concerns with the use of EVMs, but now been a bit more careful with their allegations as well, because in some states the same parties have won elections using EVMs. So in the case of the India Alliance resolution, it's very carefully worded. It says that the India Alliance has concerns and there are doubts about EVMs that are not addressed. It doesn't say that it has found examples or evidence of tampering of EVMs.
And has the Election Commission ever responded to these demands before?
The Election Commission has defended the EVMs for years now. They've maintained that EVMs have faced various legal challenges from high courts and the Supreme Court over the years, and there has been no evidence of tampering or hacking of an EVM. The Election Commission maintains a detailed FAQ page on its website, which it updates whenever it gets new questions from parties, activists, other stakeholders.
And in the end, we talk about the BRS leader K Kavitha, who has been lodged in Tihar Jail after she was arrested by the Enforcement Directorate on the 15th of March in the Delhi excise policy case. But yesterday, Kavitha was also arrested by the CBI in the same matter. The arrest happened after a Delhi court gave approval to the investigation agency to question the BRS MLA. When we spoke to Indian Express's Apurva Vishwanath, she told us about the allegations against her.
So, Kalvakuntla Kavitha is, according to the Enforcement Directorate, the kingpin of what they've been calling the South Group. So, essentially, in the excise scam, the allegation is that there was a South Group which arranged kickbacks to the Aam Aadmi Party to the tune of about 100 crores. And what the South Group was intending to achieve in the process was a favorable excise policy. So, the South Group, as they loosely refer to, is some people from Andhra Pradesh mostly. So essentially that becomes a South Group, and Kavitha in that sense is one of the key players that the ED says was involved in arranging kickbacks for the Aam Aadmi Party.
Right, and it has now been nearly a month since she was arrested by the ED. But could you talk about how the CBI has come into the picture?
So the ED specific case against Kavitha is that there were some middlemen who were acting on her behalf, basically representing Kavitha's interests with the Aam Aadmi Party. So here, her former chartered accountant Bucci Babu and another character called Arun Pillai, who is a stakeholder in a company which is involved in the liquor business, Indo Spirits. So these two people in the excise scam who are accused, the ED claims, have named Kavitha. The ED's case is also that the shares that Arun Pillai holds in Indo Spirits is actually a benami for Kavitha herself. So that's the charge with which the ED arrested her. Now she's been in judicial custody for a while, and the court has denied interim bail to her because she was deemed to be a risk in destruction of evidence. The ED's case again is that when she was asked to deposit all the mobile phones that she might have used in the last 2 years, what they got was phones where the data was erased. So the ED did tell the court that there is a risk that she could destroy evidence to that extent and she shouldn't be granted bail. Now that she's in judicial custody, the CBI has also sought her custody as an accused in the excise scam. So there are, of course, these two parallel trials going on, right? I mean, they're not really trials yet, but in the pre-trial stage. The CBI makes a corruption charge. So it is the CBI's job to move under the Prevention of Corruption Act and make a corruption case in the excise scam. The Enforcement Directorate runs a parallel investigation under the PMLA Act, which is the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, and only looks at recovering the money that was laundered through this alleged scam. And also, Kavitha is a sitting MLA, and the CBI getting involved is basically a government servant who's accused of corruption.
And so does that mean it will be harder for her to get bail now?
In fact, getting a bail in a CBI case is not that hard. But ED, of course, raises the bar. As long as she remains in custody in the ED case, getting bail in the CBI case will not really make much of a difference to her status.
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargava, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.